The night I sat on the bathroom floor and called my mother at 3 a.m. I want to tell you about a specific kind of silence. Not the silence of a library, not the silence of a sleeping house, the silence of a city that does not know you exist. London at 3 a.m. sounds like nothing. And nothing, when you are alone for the first time in your life, is the loudest sound you have ever heard. My name is James Mensah. I am 25 years old. I grew up in Accra, Ghana, in a house full of noise. My mother cooking before sunrise. My father listening to the radio at a volume that suggested he believed the neighbors also wanted to hear it. My three sisters arguing about everything from breakfast to philosophy with the same level of intensity. Silence was not something I had ever lived with. English was not something I had ever struggled with. In Ghana, English is the official language. I went to school in English. I worked in English. I dreamed in English. I had never once in my 25 years thought of English as a foreign language because it was not foreign. It was mine. I arrived in London on a Thursday evening in October. The flight was 7 hours. I slept for 4 of them and spent the other 3 reading a guide to British culture that I had bought at the airport in Accra. It told me that British people are polite, reserved, and fond of queuing. It told me that the weather would be cold and gray. It told me to say sorry frequently. It did not tell me about the silence. My room was on the 3rd floor of a building in Elephant and Castle. Small, clean. A window that looked out onto a wall. A radiator that clicked every 11 minutes with the reliability of a clock. A single bed, a desk, a kettle. I put my bag down. I sat on the bed. I looked at the wall outside the window for a long time. Then I went to find food. This is where the first thing went wrong. I walked into a small grocery store 2 streets from my building. A man behind the counter, maybe 60 years old, looked up when I came in. He said something. I did not understand a single word. Not because my English was wrong. My English was correct. But his English was something else entirely. A thick South London accent that compressed syllables and swallowed consonants and moved at a speed that my ear had never been trained for. I said, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" He repeated it. Same speed, same compression. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not quite catching that." He looked at me, patient but confused. He pointed at the door and said something that I eventually understood, from context and from the word closed, meant that the store was closing in 5 minutes. I bought the first 3 things I saw. I paid. I left. I walked back to my room holding bread, a tin of something I had not examined properly, and a kind of yogurt I had not intended to buy. I sat on the bed again. I thought, I have spoken English my entire life, and I just spent 4 minutes unable to understand a 60-year-old man in a grocery store. This is the thing about English that nobody tells you. There is no single English. There is London English and Manchester English and Scottish English and Irish English and Caribbean English and Australian English and American English and Singaporean English. There are accents within accents. There are speeds and rhythms and dropped letters and swallowed vowels and entirely different vocabularies for the same objects. A grocery store is a grocery store in Ghana. In London, it is also called a shop or an off-license depending on what it sells and when it is open. The floor you are on in a building. In Ghana, the first floor is the first floor. In Britain, the first floor is the floor above the ground floor. I had been telling people my room was on the 2nd floor all evening. It was on the 3rd. Small things. Enormous confusion. By 11 p.m. I had been in London for 4 hours and I had not spoken a full conversation with a single person. I sat at my desk and I tried to read. By midnight, I had read the same paragraph 11 times. By 1 a.m., I was lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling. By 2 a.m., I was sitting on the bathroom floor. I do not know exactly why the bathroom floor. Something about the smallness of the space. Something about the fact that it was a room with a door that closed, and a lock and a specific set of walls that made the outside London silence feel slightly less infinite. I called my mother. It was 3 a.m. in London. It was 3 a.m. in Accra. Ghana is on the same time zone as Britain in October. She answered in 2 rings. She said, "James." Not a question, just my name. The way she had said it my entire life. I said, "Hi, Mama." She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "James." I said, "I didn't understand a man in a shop today. I have spoken English for 25 years, and I stood in front of a man and I couldn't understand what he was saying." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you do?" I said, "I asked him to repeat it." She said, "And?" I said, "I still didn't understand." She said, "And then what did you do?" I said, "I asked again." She said, "James, you asked twice." I said, "Ma, yes." She said, "And the world ended?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "Ma, you asked twice, and the man repeated himself twice, and you bought your groceries and you went home. That is not failure, that is a Tuesday." I sat on the bathroom floor in London holding my phone. She said, "The English you know is yours. Don't let one accent make you forget that." I said, "What if they all sound like that?" She said, "They won't. And even if they do, you ask twice. You'll ask 3 times. You'll ask until you understand. That is not a weakness. That is how every person who has ever learned anything has done it." I said, "I miss the noise." She laughed. The specific laugh she had for things that were both true and slightly ridiculous. She said, "I know. Your father's radio is on right now. Do you want me to hold the phone up to it?" I laughed. For the first time since the plane landed. A real laugh. She held the phone up to my father's radio for 30 seconds. An Ghanaian presenter talking at full speed about something political. The sound of a house I had lived in for 25 years. Then she came back and said, "Better?" I said, "A little." She said, "Go to sleep. Tomorrow you'll understand one more word than today. That's all it takes." I went back to my room. I did not sleep immediately. But the silence was different now. Not the silence of a city that did not know I existed. Just the silence of a room at 3 a.m. That is all it was. The next morning, I went back to the same grocery store. The same man was behind the counter. He looked up when I came in. This time I spoke first. I said, "Good morning. I was in yesterday evening. I think I misunderstood you about the closing time. I'm still getting used to the accent. Could you speak a little slower if I ask you to?" "I'll do the same." He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, slowly, clearly, with the specific patience of someone who had decided to choose kindness, "Of course, mate. Where are you from?" I said, "Ghana." He said, "Long way from home." I said, "Yes." He said, "You'll get used to it. Took me 30 years and I still don't understand half of what people say." He was from Jamaica. He had been in London since 1987. We talked for 11 minutes. I understood every word. 3 things from today. 1. Could you speak a little slower? I'm still getting used to the accent. This is not an admission of failure. This is professional communication. Native English speakers use it constantly. Asking for clarity is confidence, not weakness. 2. Long way from home. When someone says this to you, they are not pointing out your distance. They are acknowledging your journey. The correct answer is simple: agree and let it open the conversation. Yes, but it's a good distance. 3. There is no single English. Every accent is a dialect. Every dialect is valid. The goal is not to understand every accent immediately. The goal is to keep asking until you do. James Mensah lived in London for 3 years. He called his mother every Thursday at 8 p.m. London time. He never again sat on the bathroom floor, not because London got easier, because he stopped waiting for it to feel like home before he let himself belong to it. And if you want to train your ear for real English, the kind spoken in London and Toronto and Singapore and Sydney, not the English of textbooks, but the English of grocery stores and office corridors and 3 a.m. conversations. Open SpeakPro. The app exposes you to real spoken English at real speeds with honest feedback on what you catch and what you miss. Not to make you feel bad, to make you better. The link is in the description. One more thing. There is a woman named Maya Santos on this channel who also arrived somewhere new with everything to prove and nothing guaranteed. Her story is longer than this one, more complicated, and it is not finished yet. Maya, episode 1 is on this channel now. Watch it tonight. See you next week.